Mr. Mesereau, thank you for being with RealUrbanNews.com.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Appreciate your time today. As we think about Michael Jackson, who you represented, and it probably was his last legal trial, his last criminal trial, we think of his death as we approach the year of his passing. What comes to your mind and when you reflect on your interaction with Mr. Jackson?
Well, first of all, I reflect on how lucky I was to meet this very special human being. He was one of the great geniuses to ever live on the planet. As a singer, as a choreographer, as an artist, he was unequaled as far as I'm concerned. We may never see anyone quite like him. But just as important, and perhaps even more important, he was one of the greatest humanitarians that ever lived. He had a wonderful love for people, particularly disadvantaged people, for children the world over. He saw himself as a champion for the world's children, to get them out of poverty, out of despair, out of abuse, out of violence. And he devoted a good portion of his life to trying to set an example for all of us, to be kind to those who are disadvantaged and to be kind to the world's children. He was someone who brought all races together, all religions together. He felt that he appealed to everyone. He was from a prominent black family. He had 2 white children, a Latino child. His plan was to have a child from every continent. And he, more than anyone I've ever met, brought all people together. He was a shy person. He was a sensitive person. He was a spiritual person. And he was a very intellectual person. He had an enormous book collection. He loved to frequent bookstores. He was one of the most special people, I think, that ever graced the planet. And it was a real honor and privilege to meet him and to defend him.
On June 25th, when Mr. Jackson passed last year, 2009, how did you learn of his passing?
I was in the middle of a jury trial in federal court in downtown Los Angeles. I came out of the courthouse at about 5:15, 5:30. And some sheriffs came up to me and told me that Michael Jackson had passed away. And my first thought was, it's just another crazy rumor, because there were always crazy rumors circulating about Michael Jackson. Where some of them would begin, I don't know. A lot of people circulated rumors for publicity, to get articles, but nevertheless, he was the subject of so many crazy rumors that I was hoping this was just another one. I called my office, and my message machine was full with calls from media all over the world to get my reaction. And I knew then that a horrible thing had happened. I was in absolute shock over it. I didn't want to believe it. And you know something, it's still hard to believe, because I don't think a day passes that I don't hear some of Michael's music. It's almost like he's still with us all the time. But the reality is we did lose a very special and wonderful human being.
How did you meet Mr. Jackson?
I met him through his brother Randy. When he was going to be charged in a criminal case in Santa Barbara County, I got calls from friends of his who wanted me to meet him and defend him. I couldn't do it at that time because I was defending actor Robert Blake in his homicide case. Months later, Blake and I had a falling out. Randy called me again and said, my brother would like to meet you, wants you to be his attorney. And I flew to Orlando, Florida, and met him. And one thing led to another.
What was that initial meeting like for you?
You know, I didn't know what to expect, because I'd known Randy for a long time, but I'd never met Michael. He seemed very quiet, very shy. He didn't say very much in our initial meeting. He had other people ask questions. He seemed to be in the background observing me and observing what I said and how I said it. And when I left the meeting, I didn't really know what to expect. I assumed they were interviewing other lawyers, and maybe I'd hear and maybe I wouldn't. And a couple of weeks later, Randy called me and said, we want to hire you. And I said to Randy, I assume you've been interviewing other lawyers? He said, no, we haven't. Michael just wanted you. So that's what happened.
How did that make you feel going into that high-profile pressure cooker of a case?
Well, it was a big one. More media from around the world covered it than O.J. Simpson and Scott Peterson combined. There's never been a case covered quite like it. And, of course, the pressure was intense. Many of my close friends didn't want me to take the case.
Why not?
Because they felt the case was unwinnable, and that for the rest of my life, anywhere I went in the world, people will say, he lost the Michael Jackson case. He's the reason Michael Jackson died in prison. So close friends didn't want me to take it. But I don't live that way. I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I have no problem with difficult cases. And I got into the case. I got to know him. I looked at the evidence. And I quickly realized something was wrong here. This man was not guilty, and he was not guilty. He was absolutely innocent of all these charges, and the jury saw it that way too.
How has your life changed since your interaction with Mr. Jackson and your representation of him?
Well, I became much better known around the world than I ever had been because it was such a big case. I've received a lot of blessings from it, from our winning a big victory, from my friendship with Michael Jackson. It also brought a few problems because everybody was approaching me for a while, some with not the greatest motives. And that happens when you have a little bit of fame, a little bit of publicity. But I've been overall very blessed by it. It's helped me in business. It's given me a higher profile. But the stress of going through that was quite difficult. You know, Johnny Cochran in his memoir said that no one quite knows what a case like this is until they're in it, and I learned very quickly what he was talking about because the pressures were intense. You had the pressure of just defending a case where the prosecution had thrown so many resources against him was bad enough, but I was constantly having to put out other fires around me, lawyers trying to get involved, trying to stab me in the back, people trying to give advice to Michael against mine. I mean, it was a very, very high-stress kind of situation. I lived in Santa Maria, California, which is northern Santa Barbara County, for 6 months. The trial lasted about 5. And it was a very, very high-stress situation, but I'm glad we came through.
How did Mr. Jackson handle that stress? We saw him at times on automobiles, standing on automobiles. I remember one morning the judge ordered him to court or else, and we were all flying up Highway 101 at 95 miles per hour. How did he deal with that constant stress? Here's a guy who seems to be pretty smooth and pretty laid back.
He deteriorated. You know, I used to talk to him at 3, 4 in the morning. In my typical schedule was I was in bed by 7:30, latest 8 o'clock, and I was up at 3 o'clock every day. I did that because it was a schedule that I functioned best with in trial. I love to study my evidence in the early morning hours before I walk into court. It also meant that I would not be seen in any restaurant, any bar, any hotel, so people could not photograph me or try and put me in a bad light because the media wanted him convicted. We know that.
Sure.
So he would call me at 3 or 4 in the morning, and he was not sleeping, he was not eating, he was very stressed out, worried about his children, depressed at times. It was a very stressful thing for him. Michael was a very shy, sensitive artist. He didn't belong in that situation, that pressure cooker being on trial for his life, with prosecutors and police painting a false portrait of him. I mean, they tried to say that he organized a criminal conspiracy to abduct children and falsely imprison a family and commit extortion, as well as the false, allegations of molestation. And it was very difficult for him to sit there and listen to this nonsense. He had a tough time with it.
Although 5 years had passed, do you think that trial and that situation, that pressure, contributed possibly to Mr. Jackson's death in some kind of way?
I don't think he ever totally recovered from it emotionally. After the acquittals, I advised him to leave Neverland. I didn't feel safe having him there. I saw how the prosecution and the sheriffs had almost done anything they could, no matter how improper, to convict him. And I felt that they were humiliated before the whole world, and they would be gunning for him. And I advised him that Neverland had run its course in his life, that he must move on, because you never knew when somebody would try and pin something else on him, that he would never live in peace there. I didn't know he was going to move to the Middle East, but if you think about it, he left Neverland quickly. He lived in the Middle East, and then he lived in Ireland. Then he lived in France briefly. He then moved to Las Vegas, then to Los Angeles. He was kind of living like a rolling stone, so I don't know if he ever really got centered or grounded after that horrible trial.
Kind of nomadic.
A little bit, I think. He just didn't know who to trust and where to feel comfortable, and I think it was a very traumatizing experience for him.
You talked about Mr. Jackson's love of his kids.
Yes.
What kind of father was he?
He was an absolutely wonderful father. I saw him often with his children. They were crazy about him. He spent a tremendous amount of time with his children, always concerned about them, always giving them love and attention, always making sure they were well educated, that they were well read. He took them around the world to broaden their perspective. I've never seen a nicer and better father in my life.
Mr. Jackson's family was with him during court, especially his mother, Catherine Jackson.
Yes.
They had a special bond. You saw that bond.
I definitely did. I not only saw it in open court, I saw it in private. During breaks, we would go up to a private room on the second floor of the courthouse, and I would see him interact with his mother and his family almost every day. And it was very clear that the person who gave him the most spiritual and emotional strength was his mother. It was clear what a bond they had. She constantly told him that God was with him, that he would come through this, that the truth would prevail, and he really did depend on her for spiritual and emotional strength.
What should we focus on in terms of Mr. Jackson's legacy?
Well, his legacy is not just as a brilliant, almost unparalleled artist. Artist on the stage, artist in music, artist in choreography, artist in poetry. He was inventive. He took risks. There's never been another Michael Jackson. I like to say that I look at the Grammy Awards and I see very talented people, but they're in slow motion next to Michael Jackson as far as I'm concerned. But in addition, he was one of the world's greatest humanitarians. He did so many things for disadvantaged children, for people in need, that he never publicized. He had a rule at one point that he would never do a concert anywhere in the world without first visiting a children's hospital. He had disabled people visit Neverland. He had children from the inner city constantly visit Neverland. He wanted to show them love and fun, animals, amusement rides, a theater. Neverland was designed to help children and disadvantaged people have fun and learn to respect one another and to respect creativity and animals and the planet. I think as an artist and as a humanitarian, he was unparalleled, and he should be remembered in both of those instances.
As a person, as an attorney, are you better for your having the opportunity to share and spend some time with Michael Jackson?
Absolutely. I'll never be the same. I learned what this wonderful human being was like. I learned what a human being he was. In person he was shy. He could sometimes be uncomfortable with a couple of people. On stage, he was in his element. He was home. But he clearly was an honest person, an intuitive person, sensitive. He liked to sit in his tree, under the moon and create music. And he would see things that none of us could see. He would put together images and tones that we could only imagine where they came from. He was a true genius, a true artist, and a true humanitarian.